call to order the meeting of the Nantucket Memorial Airport Commission for January 14th, 2020. 2020, that's quite a mouthful, isn't it? This meeting is being both video and audio recorded. Are there any comments on the agenda?
No.
Hearing none, it's adopted. Is there any comments or corrections to the minutes of December 10, 2019?
Motion to approve the minutes from 12/10/19.
So
second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried unanimously. May I have a motion, please, to ratify the warrants of December 18th, 2019 and January 8th, 2020?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried unanimously. Is there public comment at this time? Hearing none. Pending leases and contracts. Mr. Rafter, please.
The first one is a contract with Weston Solutions for $53,650, and that is for site assessment and sampling for PFAS. The next is a contract with Jacobs Engineering for $337,187 for the fuel farm fire suppression, rehabilitation, design, and construction services. And then the third is a contract with McFarland Johnson for $22,700 for the work associated with the initial fuel farm rehab, scope development and initial investigation. You may remember they started the project and then we released them and transferred it over to Jacobs. That's why there are two for the similar ones.
Any questions? Is there a motion? I'm sorry.
Motion to approve the leases and contracts set forth on Exhibit 1.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried unanimously. Pending matters, crew quarters.
The crew quarters we'll be discussing at this long-range planning subcommittee, which will be held on February 7th. We'll be discussing the cost of constructing one building and where that will fit in our priority list of capital improvement projects. Additionally, I have a meeting this Friday with the community sailing, and we're going to tour their facility and discuss potential for off-season rentals if we need them. Excuse me. You may recall we had looked into some of this for some of our seasonal employees that may stay beyond September, October, because the Thompson House does not have heating. So we're going to tour their facility and discuss what the potential is for those opportunities.
With whom were you going to speak? I'm sorry, Tom.
I'm sorry?
I didn't get to whom you were going to speak.
Diana
Brown.
Okay. From Community Sailing.
Okay, thank you.
Town Government Study Committee?
I believe in your packet, well, on the warrant article, there were some questions asked from a member of the Town Government Study Committee, and we're addressing those. But that is still moving forward. And again, it was prepared by Town Council, so they will address any particular questions in terms of the mechanism or why it was put together the way it was.
All right, anything else on that?
No.
Rates and charges for the public, changes to the rates and charges for the public hearing proposed to be scheduled for February 11th, 2020.
So,
Excuse me just a second. What is the desire of the commission, that they go through each of these changes, or that we just raise questions about ones that we have questions on?
I'd like to go through them, just to know.
Okay.
Just a quick one.
All right.
Noah has a brief presentation. He prepared this. I just wanted to get it in advance to the commission. We'd like to have a hearing next month so that we can get it approved or whatever changes made, and then give adequate notification to the airlines. So Noah can take you through it fairly quickly.
Thank you. Noah Carberg, Assistant Airport Manager. The reason we wanted to bring these before you now in advance of a February public hearing is that rates and charges, they're important for airport cost recovery, but they're also important philosophically for how an airport believes rates should be recovered for the cost of operation So we wanted to make sure you had the opportunity to see what basically is a philosophical document before it's distributed to our user class. And if there are any stark differences, those could be discussed now before it goes out to our user group. My plan was not to highlight every single change, but just the major ones that I thought would be important and that I believe you would want to know about. For the most part, changes are in red. I noticed one that was different that I'll bring forward later. The first item I'd like to bring to your attention is on page 2, Roman numeral I. It is highlighted in red. We're proposing a 5% across the board, almost across the board increase to our landing fee rate. That puts our base multiplier from $3.03 per multiple of maximum takeoff landing weight to $3.18. And you'll see that hit consistently across the board. What we are proposing is 5% across the board, except for the small GA category. And we are not proposing reducing that for our signatory carriers. We believe that that's 5% across the board, except for the GA user group.
I'm sorry, it does not apply to the signatory carriers, or it does apply?
It does apply. In past years, we applied an increase to the signatory carrier group, but then we also increased the exemption. So instead of bearing the full 5% increase, we increased basically the discount rate from, I believe, 75 or 78% to 68%, which knocks it down to a 3% increase on that user group instead of the 5% increase. The next major change.
I'm sorry, would you go back to the one on page 1?
Certainly.
Please, the charge for the outdoor boarding area.
So this is a similar charge to what we imposed last year. We call it out on the rates and charges sheet, even though it's a rental rate category for the outdoor boarding area. We did carry a cost escalator of 5% for the rent for that area. So for each of our secure tenant airlines, we apportion rent for that space to those airlines.
Do all the airlines use it?
All of the secure airlines, if they don't use it directly, they benefit from it. The existence of it allows their operation to function.
Okay. Thank you.
So on page 5, Roman numeral D, ramp fee at the bottom. While we are proposing an average 5% increase across ramp fee categories, I do want to call out that this is a graduated increase in ramp fees. As you're well aware, we have space constraints. A great surrogate for the footprint of an aircraft is its weight class. Given length in the wings, longer length, wider wingspan equates to a heavier aircraft. While the 5% is average, it's graduated where the lighter aircraft see a smaller percentage increase. So for aircraft under 6,000 pounds, we're not proposing any increase to ramp fee. We're proposing a 2.5% increase to ramp fee for the 6,001 to 10,4999 pound category, and for the up to just below 25,000 pound category. And as you follow along, it's a 10% increase for aircraft over 100,000 pounds, 7.5% increase for 50,000 to just under 100,000 pounds. And again, we believe this is the equitable approach for ramp fees, predominantly on our GA corporate side. The larger aircraft are the ones who are taxing the system. So we believe they should bear the proportionate cost for that.
What models are over 100,000 pounds?
Don't quote me on it, but I believe the Gulfstream 7500 that has entered service, the G650 is close. I don't believe it's over. We also have had a Boeing business jet before. Dave, I don't know if we've had a 37400. No, we have, as a charter, a Miami Air charter.
And we've had MD-80s and things too. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
The Global is not, though.
The Global is just under, I believe the Global is 99,600.
Okay, thanks.
On page 7, item A, we are proposing, it's not highlighted because it's a no change being made. We want to keep the landing for GA aircraft at $5 per landing.
They scream at that.
On page 8, for tie-down and hangar tenants, I want to call out, again, it's not highlighted. We're proposing no increase in tie-down or hangar rentals for those tenants. Also, at the bottom of page 8, item D, we wanted to bring a future fee waiver to your attention. We discussed it with the Nantucket Flying Association. We would come back to you with a formal policy for your approval as well. But the concept is that we would craft a discount to tenant aircraft rents in exchange for them providing flight opportunities to children. There are several opportunities. I believe it's the Young Eagles that codifies this, and there might be one or two more. So we look forward to coming back to you for
This
your
would be a rent abatement kind of thing?
Correct. It would be if it's 2 flights a month, maybe it's a 20% rent abatement. Those terms have to be crafted.
Would you consider, please, as you go forward with it, the idea of waiving the landing fees and the, other charges that might accrue rather than the rents?
For these tenants are not charged a ramp or landing fee. They pay a hangar or tie down fee in lieu of those two charges.
Okay, well, what if somebody doesn't have does this include people who are paying tie-down fees?
It includes our tenant list, so our year-round or our seasonal tenants who have an agreement with the airport. It wouldn't include, Dan, an itinerant passenger who flies their 182 over from New Haven for the day. They would not be eligible.
All right, thanks.
On page 9, item C, we would like to institute a gate overstay fee. The purpose is for us to effectively manage our gates for our seasonal large air carrier service. We have a couple of airlines who have a common ground handler and utilize the same gate. We're not looking at to raise money or to really be punitive, but we do need some kind of graduated fine for making sure that airlines are respecting their use of the gate.
As we discussed with Mr. Rafter, would you please use a common word in all four? In other words, not switch between operation and occurrence?
So noted. We'll revise that.
Please, thank you.
And on page 11, item G at the bottom, we are proposing to revise the ramp access escort fee without a permit. What this does, and it's common at other full-service FBOs, is we had been charging $10 for a user to be escorted to the aircraft to pick up their client or their boss or other person they have a business relationship with. We would like to offer the service, but to take someone off of the line to provide it, it costs the airport much more than $10. We're not necessarily trying to discourage the use, but we think $75 is much more appropriate for our cost of providing that service.
It's quite a jump.
It does take someone off the line for quite a bit of time, and there unfortunately have been occurrences where operations staff have been busy and something is lost in the communication and it turns into a much larger issue. I believe I only have one or two more to highlight. Well, thank you. That's all that I wish to call out.
Back on page 12, Mr. Rafter and Mr. Gasparo and I discussed it this morning, and would like to offer to the commission the suggestion that all violations be $50 per day. Don't see any reason why the ones in the main lot should be lower. This is on D on page 12. Is there any objection to that?
I don't.
I think it makes sense.
No?
A ticket's a ticket.
Right.
Right, yeah, simplify it.
Right.
Okay. All right. Would you include that change, please?
Yes, we will.
And what did you change on page 15 where it's highlighted there? Is that, I thought that was the policy already.
That's my impression as well. I believe I highlighted or kept a highlight from a previous version. I believe that was pre-existing language.
All right, well, would you check it before you send it out to make sure whether it should be highlighted or not, please?
Yes.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments?
I had one.
Yes, sir.
I'm just curious in the development of these changes, how much the study that we commissioned last year was used or not used to develop these, and do you feel that there's anything further perhaps from reviewing that might help this?
My understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, no, but the study we did last year created a rates and charges model, which basically we take these numbers, we put it in, and it'll spit out what the revenues will be. So it gives us some guidelines as to what areas, and that's where we focused on this. That's, I believe, how Noah determined the ramp. We look at the ramp and the landing fees. So what we'll do is we'll put these new numbers into the model, and it'll tell us what the impacts would be, if you will.
Thanks. And then I had one other question was, I'm wondering if, as part of this, you also reviewed the advertising rates and charges, or if that's sort of just been set aside. And I'm not advocating for a change or not, but just having just developed the program, if there's any thought there.
As part of the overall program development, the consultant recommended that we start out with one rate. We bumped it up a little bit last year in certain categories, and then we level it out, and then every few years look at the increase, because they're continuously renewing agreements. So when we change it, we have to give more than adequate notice. And she said, again, what we're trying to do is build the
Base of advertising.
we're trying to get the volume first, and then we'll build up. And we're almost sold out, but not quite on advertising opportunities.
And I think that was my point. Have you looked at this in terms of if there's a particular category that you found you are sold out, then that would be a category that perhaps could absorb a slightly higher fee?
Yeah, we actually, I think in the last iteration too, we carved out one of those sections because we saw it was doing well and changed the entire rate.
But that's not something that you feel
Not
should
at
be
this
looked at
time,
right now?
No, I'd keep it the same.
Okay, thank you.
What do you know about what other airports do with respect to increasing the frequency of increases in things like ramp fees and landing fees and so forth?
Most major commercial airports will do at least an annual, if not a quarterly revision. Typically, these are airports that are on a much more, they review these much more frequently based on the method of their agreement with the airlines.
Yeah, I think it depends on the methodology. Some of them, as Noah was saying, if they have a method that's in their lease that says we're going to go on a completely residual basis for a cost center, then it gets reviewed and updated more frequently. Other airports have rates by ordinance or something like that, where the town or the city has to actually change it. So it depends on, and if it's compensatory methodology, depends on how well you're doing with your budget and things.
But I mean, is it what I'm gathering from what I'm hearing from Mr. Carberg is that it is fairly common to increase them annually, or?
I'd want to look at that. I'd say more if it's a residual type fee, because and again, it depends on your level of activity. But
But we're not permitted to do these seasonally, are we?
Well, I got some somewhat favorable feedback from FAA when I asked if we could do a different rate structure on season, off season, and he said he didn't see why not. I'd like to get that more clarified because I've heard otherwise, so. But that's
I would
something we
like to
may be
get,
looking
yeah,
at.
we should
too.
get that clarified. And I would, if we can, I think we should seize the day,
Yeah.
but not this year. All right, are there any other questions or comments on the proposed rate revision to the rates and charges? Hearing none, I will entertain them. I'm sorry.
I did have one, which was
Okay.
back to, we've discussed the perhaps APU use fee and a sliding type of scale, and whether we're gonna try to develop anything.
Well, currently the APU fee is rolled into the ramp fee.
So not the GPU, but an APU.
Oh, APU, I'm
fee
sorry.
That would be related to, very similar to your gate overstay fee that you've proposed this time. And I thought we were gonna
So
perhaps
an
invest-
APU penalty type fee.
almost exactly like the
I forgot
gate
about that,
overstay fee.
honestly.
I think we've had a lot of discussion, and I thought next time we did the rates and charges, that was gonna be something we at least investigated that said, you know, we've got a policy, and then at least put something in there to start.
You mean if they run it for more than 20 minutes? Or
Right, like the example would be that, you know, after, so you get 15 minutes. So let's say after 30 minutes, you get a warning.
Yes.
After 45 minutes, it's $50. After an hour, it's
Similar, like you say, to the
$500.
overstay.
Something
Right,
along those
yeah,
lines.
okay. I just wanted to clarify that and make sure everybody
I
understood.
certainly advocate a warning and that you get some grace period because of just the method of operation.
We can certainly look into it and propose it. I think you're gonna hear a lot of feedback, but the implementation is where I'd be concerned.
I would think it'd be hard to police that.
Yeah, and the delay in the time, is that like usually weather, waiting on weather, or?
It's a combination of things, whether it's weather or if the other airport's congested or if they have a, what you call plan, different air traffic management plans in place. It depends, you know, some of it is just pure, I want to get out there early and get the plane ready for the customer. It's a combination of things.
It's hard to punish someone for,
Well, and that's why I say the implementation is difficult because it's very discretionary. If you may have a justifiable reason that, okay, Kennedy is under a management plan, I can't get out, you know, but I'm waiting for clearance. And there's a chance, all right, my clearance isn't good for another hour, but there's a chance I can get out in 10 minutes. We don't know with air traffic management, so.
I would suggest for that we would have, an ability for it to be waived by the operations supervisor, right? So as long as they provide a reason, okay, fine. I'm just trying to add a little bit of teeth because we've had a lot of discussions, and again, it goes really to environmental concerns as well. You've got jets idling for hours that it's both a noise as well as fumes and, the whole carbon neutral.
that's a hard thing to,
Right.
to police in any way. I mean, then they'll say, oh, they have a congestion, air traffic.
Yeah, you got
Wait
10
on that.
planes out
I
there,
mean,
4 of
it's-
them are running APUs, you gotta put a stopwatch
If you really
on
gotta then look up, see
I
if
think
there
that's
really
hard for
is
the-
one.
to
or-
manage it.
But we do have a policy that it's a 15-minute policy, and I think part of what I was trying to get at for years, really, we're trying to discuss a way, is that understanding there are periods of time on a Sunday afternoon that's just not going to work. You just, the airport is just too busy. But we also see periods of time, and I see this a lot, where it might be 5 o'clock in the morning. There's only one jet out there, and it's running for well over an hour, right? So you're up, and then if we were able to, through something like this that added a little bit of teeth for operations to be able to say to them, there is potentially a penalty for this. I'm trying to start an idea that gives the policy of the commission as well as the staff some backing. And they started tracking these for the last 2 years to try to get a sense of, how many of these, the warnings are given in the jets. And the last spreadsheet that I saw, many of the warnings are just simply disregarded, because the staff has there's no teeth in the policy or ability to say, and I don't think because of the air system and limitations to how much we could do, I don't think you could make them shut it down. And I think that having a fee structure that was a sliding scale would be a way to say, well, you're doing this at your own, you've chosen then to continue, and there's a penalty for that. And my hope that I've discussed, I think we discussed in the environmental subcommittee, would be then funds generated from this, while would go into essentially our overall budget, but there could be some focus that they actually would become potentially. We could look at what was generated and then use that towards developing purchasing new ground power units and things that actually would help the overall reduction of both noise and emissions on the ramp, so that it would be a two-pronged approach, one which raises some revenue and also provides a disincentive to continue the operation. Right now, there's no reason for someone to not just simply do what's best for them. And what about, where is the public interest protected in terms of both environmental, and we're also looking at the expansion of the ramp, and as part of that, this could then get tied into it.
I see where Commissioner Gasparo is coming from. We're trying to elevate the awareness of it. And right now, we go up and give them a warning slip or something, it's just thrown out and dismissed somewhat. So
I'm wondering, I don't think we can do anything for this particular hearing, because it needs to be run by the commission first. But I'm wondering if we can't, set a target for later in the season to do this, and just put it in reserve, put people on notice that we're considering this as part of this process. And hang on just a second. Because I think there are a number of things that can be considered. One of them is, for example, a blanket waiver if the weather's bad. If all the airports on the East Coast are having weather problems. I don't know what the right answer is. But I think there are certain ways to handle it. Another way is to make them get pre-clearance. If they're going to be running their APU.
You can't.
Well, some of them can. I mean, some of them can predict how long it's going to be.
Yeah, but I've literally heard airplanes be given a clearance, or they're told there's a delay program in effect, and you're not released until an hour and 15 or an hour and a half. Mm-hmm. And then 10 minutes later, you hear the controller get on and say, "Are you ready to go?" Yeah, okay, then we got an opening for you. But again, we can put together guidelines, like you said, whether it's weather, or if it's that, if we hear the transmission or air traffic says, yeah, there's traffic management in effect, we can take those things into consideration. What we may think about doing, Dan, is you may notice in here we have some other fees that are just labeled and to be determined. Mm-hmm. And what that's doing is communicating to the users that we will be considering these fees, or they may be coming in the future.
Well, at the very least, I think we should do that. Signal it in that way, if everybody's agreeable. Mm-hmm. But I would like to see us look at it, take a serious look at it, both the environmental subcommittee and the airport management, to try to figure out whether there is any realistic way of doing this, because we keep talking about it, and let's try to put it to bed, one way or the other. Does that make sense?
I appreciate that.
I think it's A, hard to police, and B, the pilots don't have control over their operation because of ATC. I mean,
well, some of them do. I mean, some of them do in the sense that they do come out at 5 o'clock in the morning and start the engines because they don't have any place to sit and drink their coffee except in the cockpit. And
well, what about, a prohibition before 7, something like that?
Well, again, these are all,
That's an obvious abuse.
yeah, these are the things that, Mr. Carberg, you had something you wanted to say.
Thank you. I'm bursting at the seams with this. I want to try to hit this in the middle, and I do think I have an initial workable approach. Going back to the voluntary landing fee abatement program for flying the noise corridors. The FAA's guidance was specific to that fee structure. It couldn't be punitive, but it could be voluntary and it could be reimbursable. The difficulty that the Commission would face with adopting a punitive structure is that it does preempt the sole authority of FAA to mitigate and run the national air traffic system related to clearances and delays. The fee option that I would propose, and it would be almost a purely research fee option, would be to have an a la carte item on here, which would be $100 for additional 30 minutes of APU runs. If a pilot knows they're going to be in at 6 a.m. and running their APU for an hour, they have an opportunity to purchase base APU run times. It would be an FBO item. It would be something we could track to an aircraft type, an aircraft operation, a frequency, a time of day,
Well, what would be their incentive to do it?
to know that they're doing the right thing. $100 for some customers to be able to say they did the right thing by a community is a legitimate carrot.
But there's no disincentive. To Dan's point, where there's no, why would they? In other words, you can do this for free.
Yeah, I mean,
That is their right as an aircraft operator when it comes to operating an aircraft. I think that is the difficulty we all face, and frankly, many other corporate reliever airports in the nation face when it comes to APU and ground noise.
How is the gate, and I'm not trying to be in any way be argumentative, I think this is a very good discussion that perhaps I wasn't completely prepared for tonight, but how is the gate overstay fee different?
We control that resource and we apportion it. We have much more demand than we have space available, and we choose to micromanage it.
All right, I'm going to make a suggestion that the environmental committee take this up subcommittee take this up one more time and come back with a recommendation in which hopefully the management will join as to whether any further action on this topic is appropriate.
And can we add to the rates and charges a to be determined line
Yes.
so that it's something that is worked on in the next?
Right.
I don't know how much more intelligent I could be at a subcommittee meeting than I am right here. I've been a pilot waiting for ATC, a clearance mostly out of Westchester County, which is busier than this. And it's I guess with a recip you just have a battery on. I guess with a jet aircraft, you probably have to run an APU to keep your system going. You can't just run down a battery waiting for a clearance. You're sitting there for an hour waiting for a clearance to get out of there, and you've got 32 people in front of you. Again, the preemption thing, which Noah mentioned, would be a factor which might preclude us assessing a fee anyway.
Well, then the question is, there are people who abuse it, and there's no question about that. And the pilots go out and they start their APUs early on to get the plane cool.
Right.
Which, if a customer or the owner is coming 2 hours later, it's ridiculous. So how do you deal with that situation? Because that's what I think is really Mr. Gasparo's concern.
Yeah, I'm all for no penalty if you're waiting for clearance. Absolutely, that's not right for us to. It's the elective operation, and that I think would also hopefully keep us out of trouble with the FAA, right? Because and clearly there could be some abuse of that even, or subjectivity to, hey, we were waiting for a clearance. But to the extent that that's where I think your operations supervisor is listening to the communications, and if they tell them one thing and they clearly understand that they could get up and go right now, there's nobody else there.
But let me pose a situation that would put us in a very precarious position. The owner says, I want to leave at 9:30 a.m. The crew comes out, prepares the aircraft. They need to get their APU up and running, get the avionics started, get their clearance, get all that stuff lined up. So they're out there 20 minutes, half hour early, and they fire everything up. And the owner says, I'm going to be delayed an hour or 40 minutes or 10 minutes, and they don't show up for 45 minutes. We're deteriorating the customer service level, and we're punishing them to some extent. We can't say, you got to shut it down now.
mean,
And then the
that's-
guy shows up and all of a sudden his plane's not ready. He paid $60 million for an airplane that he can't have ready to go. The whole reason he paid for it is to
How
get
big a
it
problem is
timely.
it? How many people are abusing it and how
Oh.
often?
Well, it depends on how you define abuse. I agree that, yes, there are some people that are out there, one airplane and they're sitting there, trust me, my office, I sit next to it, I hear this, that are out there for an hour and, hour and a half at times when there's really no need, but we don't know the
No need that you
circumstances.
know.
Yeah, that I know.
Because we don't know.
So I'm trying to listen to the radio, see if there's any issues, but I don't know if the owner's having difficulty, if they were, having a problem getting there. We actually have some owners that have some physical challenges too. That trying to get to and from the airplane, sometimes they're not on time.
I'm sorry.
So if I may, that's exactly where I was trying to go with the development of this, is that it becomes essentially somewhat of a disincentive because it's, we're not interfering. We're not trying to force somebody to shut something down. But after a certain period, there is a cost associated with their decision to continue to run that. And the revenue that you could get from that could then help to fund essentially mitigation strategies across the ramp.
Does that cost the airport money?
To,
We'll buy
To run-
GPUs for mitigation, certainly. Like we have it's
are you asking
$45,000.
for enforcement or for?
No. I mean, if they're sitting there and they're turning on the APU and running it, that doesn't cost the airport.
Well, it's
It's
an
not a
environmental
cost to
impact, is my point.
Well,
No, yeah.
But I mean, there's no direct cost. I'm saying, if we have a direct cost and it's going up,
They're
but if there is none.
They're using more fuel, it might be more revenue.
Right, it's just, right, the opposite.
No, it's not.
Or it's not scarce, you know what I mean? Like, it's not a thing,
I
a scarce
will-
resource that you could put somewhere else.
Whatever we decide, and if we decide to implement this type of fee, I want to give you a little caution. I could almost guarantee you're going to have some public feedback from some very large organizations, and they're going to tell you exactly what they think and what the law is and everything else. So we can sit here and
I don't think we
speculate
want to
all
be sued for
No.
assessing
No,
a
no,
fee.
no,
either.
but they will come
Which-
in and they
which-
will tell
which-
you, here's what you can and why you can't, and why you should and why you shouldn't.
Well, why you should and why you shouldn't is different from why you can't and why you can't.
Well, there may be laws that we don't know about, that's what I'm saying.
Well,
I
then
don't
if
know.
there aren't, we need to know about them. But I go back, I still think it would be worth taking one more bite of this apple and seeing whether there's any cider in it or not.
I think the better policy might be, a big placard, local environmental concerns are impacted by APU use. Please minimize use as much as possible.
We have.
Yeah,
we
Noah's
have
done a
large
great job
things.
in the last
we
5
have-
years with
yeah.
that.
It's on the catering, didn't
We have it on the shed, we have it on the building, we do it in the catering, we have them in the FBO, stand-up signs.
And
put
if
it
I
all
may,
over.
this was borne out through the one weekend study as well. The ground noise from the ramp, I mean, it supported that, now I can't say that proves whether it's somebody that it was a single jet that was excessive, but certainly one thing that came out of it is there is, significant ground noise from the ramp operations, and that might seem
Do we have any sense, probably not, but do we have any sense of whether there is a difference in the way one of the big fleet operators handles this kind of thing than private owners?
I just think their situations are different. you know, what they're facing.
Why?
Because if you own the airplane or you own a portion of that airplane, you have much more say in who's going to do what. In other words, if I'm a NetJet customer and I have a card, I bought into a club.
Right.
Me telling the pilot what he should and shouldn't do for X dollars, or him telling me, you know, well, I had to run the APU longer for you, so now your price just went up, versus telling the owner of that airplane that's the difference, I think. The owner might just say, fine, I'll take it because I want to be later, I want this or I want that. Whereas somebody buys into a club that says, here's what your monthly fee or your whatever.
Yeah, they're gonna run the
Some hours
operation. The
are-
owner's not telling them how to run it.
Yeah,
NetJets
but
is
I
gonna say,
mean-
here's what we're doing.
Yeah, but
but it's going to impact their cost to their program.
I believe I have your answer, Dan. The Part 135 on demands, like NetJets, they're required through the FAA delegation effort to have a standard operating procedure. There's a different aeronautical term for it, but it's the manual on how they operate, how they do their pre-flight checks. One of the consequences, and this is nationwide, fleet-wide, of the transition to larger, more modern aircraft, is that they're more complex. We still have a 15-minute rule from the age of Learjets and the age of Globals and G4s and 6s. That manual in many cases specifies that the pre-run time is a minimum of 30, 45, or 60 minutes. It's specific to the aircraft and specific to the operator's standard operating procedures. When you're looking at prospective differences, a 135 would have a difference than a owner-owned aircraft, and each aircraft would have a difference based on who operates it and if it's a Challenger 300 or a G4. So it does get tedious in the details.
Mr. Gasparo?
I understand. I don't think we're gonna make any more sausage here tonight. But if, you know, I appreciate the discussion. If we just simply put in to be determined, APU use, what do you call it, a fee? I'll let you wordsmith it.
Overuse.
Not overuse with no actual
Excessive
proposal
APU
for this
use or
time,
something.
and then hopefully that some additional resources as you're able to, understanding that the staff needs to prioritize their tasks, we could maybe investigate this a little further. I think that would be, I'd be happy with that.
Like, okay, the fee to be determined, or if there is a fee?
It's
If there is a
almost-
fee,
You know,
if
like-
there is a fee.
Right, just
Because
yeah.
otherwise that's a big red flag to say, oh, we
Right.
just haven't just determined, we're gonna charge.
So I think it's, you know, like here we have an asterisk, to be determined through rates and charge study adopted at a future public hearing process. It would get the same asterisk. It's just, you know,
Well,
kind
no,
of,
in the
that's,
same category.
that's not exactly what I interpreted Planser's question to be. You,
In other words, are we putting, where would it go in? What do you, in rates and charges? It would be,
it would be somewhere associated with the ramp. Non-aeronautic, no,
That's aeronautical.
right, so it would go,
It would
page 9.
Page 9, yes.
Yeah, under use, service, and administrative fees. And it would just essentially probably become item,
D,
yeah, probably try to keep it, or, you know, somewhere up near the ground power unit, sort of, so something like
I
that.
would put it as item B and reorder it.
I think that makes sense.
but I think it would be better to do like we haven't determined whether there would be a fee or not.
Right.
If we say fee and then to be determined is kind of like, okay, we've decided we're gonna charge, but we haven't decided how much.
If I may, that's why it says, if you read the asterisks at the bottom, it's more descriptive than just to be determined. There's more that would have to happen. Future public hearing, I think the asterisk is appropriately
yeah,
descriptive.
rather than trying to wordsmith that, I think it probably, it covers it. It does, I agree with you, Ms. Planser, that it does imply that it's going to happen.
Right. I just think that might be more of a red flag if.
Well, maybe
groups are
we
looking,
get, maybe,
you know,
maybe
and
that's all right,
someone
and we
would-
get some feedback
Yeah.
and see what kind of reaction we get.
Maybe it's helpful.
That's
It
what I
might-
was gonna
might be-
say. It could be
okay.
helpful.
Someone else almost does the homework
Yeah.
Yeah.
and says, this is why you guys better not do
If
this.
If it doesn't
We're thinking
raise
about
any
this.
Okay.
flags,
Yeah.
okay,
They're
fair
not
enough.
gonna come to us and say,
That's what
"Hey,
we want."
You can't, and here's why, or if you're gonna do it this way, or oh, so-and-so does it that way.
Yeah.
And we'll research other airports too.
I would just call it APU overuse fee. To use the same language, the overstay fee, and people say,
Right.
well, what's that supposed to be? And then we tell them, and then they say, no way, Jose.
Well, maybe they'll be more conscious of it, you know, not to run their engine so long.
Okay, how about we do that? Does that work from everybody's perspective? Anybody object?
No.
Thank you.
All right. Moving right, oh, we need a motion, I guess, to approve or schedule the hearing next month. Do we
Do we?
need a motion to schedule the
I
hearing?
don't think so. I think we
think they
just
just
put it on
Okay.
the agenda and schedule. We will have to, I believe, advertise 2 weeks in advance publicly.
Right.
I wonder if it wouldn't be a good idea if somebody reads our minutes, you know, then they're, you know, I don't know who reads the minutes after a meeting. And be aware of
no
it
clue.
before the 2 weeks.
Well, if they're listening, they'll be aware of it.
That's true.
So they're a vast audience. All right, moving on. Final budget.
Final budget is in your packet. No changes since the last version that you saw. Again, we continue with no reliance on retained earnings. We discussed previously the major impact on the expense side was in professional services directly related to some potential legal costs. We've seen a significant increase in the revenues based on CPI and land rentals. But we'd like to ask for your approval tonight. Jamie and Noah will be presenting this budget to the FinCom a week from today.
I'd just like to remind my fellow commissioners that there is no puffery in the revenue side of the budget based on imagined potential income from
We're not
anything,
allowed to do that.
right? So they're good, they're solid numbers based on history and with a couple of permissible adjustments. Any questions or further questions or comments?
Make a motion to adopt the proposed fiscal 2021 final budget as presented.
For, I guess we should say for the enterprise fund, the Nantucket Memorial Airport Enterprise Fund.
Yes.
I'll second.
Any other comments? Please, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried unanimously.
I would like to note though, Dan, too, over the past few years, Jamie has done an amazing job, well, a number of ways, but in getting this budget to a point where it's a very good managing tool. We're able to use it, and we can actually see the different categories and where we're spending it. And if you recall, it took first couple of years organizing, putting things in the proper place. So it's now a useful tool, even though we still go by, we manage by actuals. This is a very good product.
Yeah, except you can't exceed the budget overall, right? So you have to be able to follow it.
Yeah, but we're not buying buses out of the a category that may be labeled for, I don't know, T-shirts or uniforms or something.
You mean they did that before?
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you, Jamie.
Thank you very much, Jamie. Yes, as always, you do a very wonderful job. And I don't mean to exclude anybody else from that comment, but specifically
When it comes to the budget,
on numbers matters. Anyway, capital projects update.
in your packet is the latest list of capital projects. The one change that we're requesting approval for tonight is the increase in the fuel farm rehabilitation. This is based on an updated estimate. The project is now estimated at $1,058,600. Oh, this is a supplemental, I'm sorry, the total project's 1.8 million. So this will be a supplemental And the proposal is to use $558,600 from retained earnings, and the other $500,000 possibly take as a long-term borrowing if need be. If possible, we will attempt to get that from the fuel fund, but we'll see how that performs. I believe you've already seen all the other.
All right, we don't need to approve that, right?
I think you've already approved the others, yeah.
Right.
So
Well, should we approve it with the
I
infrastructure?
think that's probably best, yeah.
Is there a motion to approve the revised capital request summary for fiscal year '21?
I had a question, I mean, because everything isn't gonna be needed in 2021. Do we stagger that? I mean, it seems like how, they're all worn out, but,
Some of them are staggered. A lot of the vehicle and equipment purchases get staggered. And we have a replacement program, if you will, that says, here's so many years or hours are on the engine and so on and so forth. Some of it just happens that a piece of equipment passes out.
You see, they're buying one bus out of two.
right, I
yeah,
see that.
so we're
but I just-
staggering that.
yeah.
We are trying our best to reduce the amount of capital projects that we're undertaking because we have some, as you know, taxiway Echo alone is a major project. And behind that, a year or so is going to be the runway. So there are two big items. Granted, they're heavily funded through state and FAA, but it's still going to be a chunk of money out of our account, so.
And I also realize you can't do like I can and have my car go 100 years until, because if it runs down or breaks down, we're in trouble
Well,
as a business.
and
I mean, I know you've got some that are 9 and 10 years old and all, but I just was wondering about
well,
that.
it's funny you say that because I was approving some POs this week and I thought to myself, you know, I could be a real stickler and say, no, we got to cut back here, and here, but our maintenance crew does a great job keeping vehicles for a long time.
Yeah. And I know they get more use than my car.
May I have a motion, please, to approve the revised capital request summary?
Just a question, it says AIP pays $4,030,000. That's not,
Actually, that's not true, is it? Those are projects subject to reimbursement, so actually, it would only be 90% of the 4
Well,
million.
in fact, that particular project is a security project, which, if you recall, there's a whole different
That's right.
categorization of eligibility for this. So the consultant has literally taken every piece of the project, from the door hardware to the door itself, to the access control, to the reader, and has had to determine whether or not it's eligible or ineligible. They've prepared that list for phase 1. They're preparing it for phase 2. They got the schedule of values from the contractor on phase 1, so they will apply that dollar amount to it. We have a meeting scheduled on January 31st with the FAA to walk through all of these, every single point, every access point, every camera, to determine whether or not they believe it's eligible. And we have to make our case. And the consultant has done a very good job putting a matrix together, identifying all the issues or the items, and stating either it's a program guidance letter from FAA, it's a regulation, it's a compliance manual, whatever. So the way this will work with the security project is, and I confirmed this just last week with Mass DOT, for argument's sake, let's assume FAA says 56% of the project is eligible for the 90% funding. So they'll take that part and they'll say 90%, we'll pay 90% of that. Under a security project, MassDOT will pick up the 10% match for that 56%. They typically will also pick up the entire remainder of non-eligible items. So a typical security project gets funded completely through FAA and MassDOT.
do we have to front fund this and then?
Yes, because they do not have the money at this time, and they told us, put the application in for the entire amount. We will come back and say we only have this much at this point in time. If at the end of their fiscal year, for example, though, they have excess money, which is, if you recall, we got $800,000 discretionary from the state to do our concrete pads, and they need to find a place to put it, we will have that application already in, and they may allocate a portion of it. And the same in subsequent years, they said over the course of a few years, we'll do our best to get you back and made whole.
Of course, this is not happening for one more year.
No,
Well,
secure-
security
That's
is
happening,
beginning
yeah.
now. As a matter of fact, I'll give you my report in a second, but they're in this week doing training, next week mobilization, beginning construction, third week.
You need to go. Okay. Any other questions? I reiterate my request for a motion to approve
Make
the
a motion to
capital
approve.
request summary
I'll
as
make a
revised.
motion
And I'll
to
second it.
approve the capital projects.
Any
date
further
as
comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried unanimously. All right. Parking report.
You have in your packet a parking report, and you'll notice from fiscal year 18 and 19, gross revenues were up 10%, violation revenues up 56%, total gross receipts or revenues up 15%, and the net revenue was up 21% or $14,299. Now you may look back and see that we made quite a bit more money in the past, but as I mentioned when we did this transition, there's a lot of intangible costs associated with the level of effort that our employees had to put into continuously repairing, fixing jams, operating the system, and so on and so forth. So we are growing, and in fact, if you look at the year-to-date report, you'll see that the gross receipts, again, are up 20%, violations 11, total gross revenue is up 19%, and net revenue is up 23,422, which is almost more than, or as much as we made in the entire last year. So we're starting to show progress in this, and a lot of that too is from, and again, this is another project that Jamie inherited. Everybody's workload on parking dropped except Jamie's when we went to the management company. But she has worked closely with Linda True, who has taken initiative too to step up and increase the frequency of patrols. Because again, this is a there's self-pay type system, and the more frequently that we do the patrols, the more violations that are issued, and that's why you see some of the increases that you see here. So.
Any questions? Thank
I'd
you.
say thank Linda also for her part in this,
Will do.
getting us more money,
Yeah.
revenue.
Then we have the audit, which is clean, which is very nice to see. And then past that, I raised the question about why the land is only valued at $2 million, and apparently they carry it at cost for this purpose. So, so be it. Then the PFC charges and expenditures are in here as well.
Yeah, I think of
the very-
note on both of those is that we're fully compliant and very good performance on the financials year over year. And in PFCs, again, no deficiencies and fully compliant, so.
Good. Job well done.
Very good, thank you. Manager's report.
On the project side of the house, on the Bunker Road infiltrator, the infiltrator's been put in, it's working very well. Our next step is to clean out the dry well and the catch basins, and we're also working with Jacobs Engineering to do an overall drainage plan for the entire airport. Security project phase 1, as I mentioned earlier, the contractor's in this week doing security and safety training. Next week we'll be mobilizing, and then the third week beginning the construction. Phase 2 bids will be out January 14th. They're due back in February 25th. And as I mentioned, we have a meeting on the 31st with the FAA to determine the eligibility levels for the entire project. The EAEIS, the ENF was submitted, a public hearing was held, or public meeting was held December 18th. We only had one member from the public attend. There's been a lot of correspondence recently with comments back from other agencies and are being addressed by NOAA and the consultant. and we expect a response due this Friday, which I asked if it was the record decision, and then I was told no, but then I see it maybe a draft record of decision, so I know it's a key milestone that we're supposed to be getting something back from them. And if you have questions, I'm going to turn it over to the expert. I don't fully understand that one, but PFC application number 2 is moving forward. We sent the consultation letter to FAA for their approval. They're reviewing it. Fuel farm rehabilitation. We discussed the task orders earlier. We are researching the procurement process. I got some good feedback. Got some feedback from our attorneys today. It's good information, not maybe what I wanted to hear, but very good direction. And we're looking to package that as one project as opposed to 2. You may recall we were looking, well, let me take that back. 1 construction season as opposed to 2. Initially, we talked about possibly doing work in the spring and then the fall. Because of some long lead items and some other drawbacks, we're now looking at the construction to take place in the fall. Engineers looked at the pipes and said you should be okay getting through this summer, but we still may split it into 2 projects because they're very unique and diverse. One is firefighting, the other is fuel, plumbing, and piping. So we're still working through that procurement process. Taxiway Echo, we have 60% design, and we had a meeting last Friday with the FAA and MassDOT to go through that design. The estimate is back up to $19 million. So we're going through that process, and a lot of comments, a lot of internal work. Dave, Preston, Johnny all did a great job on providing us comments with that. We're replacing the floor in TSA bag screening offices. They had a flooding issue, which maintenance, we believe, resolved the source of that flooding, and now we're replacing the flooring in there. On the RFP bid update, we received 1 expression of interest for the hangar, and I'm going to be meeting with that individual this week to begin establishing basic terms. Proceeding with the appraisal process, as we discussed the policy previously, we're still working on developing requests for expression of interest for the freight hangar and working on post-screening concession. Also working on RFQs for engineering and planning services. The on-calls are due for expiration in the next few months, and a number of other fuel and farm inspection and other parking management services as well. On the operations side of the house, in your packet is the press release that came out from FAA indicating their intention to revoke the license of Nantucket Express. And according to the state website, that company was disbanded, I believe it was in June of 2019 by court order. We have legal looking into the implications of this and how it may impact some of the operators and pilots. We're transitioning the X1 software, going through that process. They were out, they began collecting data, and we're going to begin that transition shortly. Starting to set up meetings with seasonal carriers about their upcoming summer season and establishing a coordination meeting with TSA as well on that. Any questions before I go to statistics? On the numbers side of the house, the operations were up almost 12.6% over last November. The year-to-date is up 18.26%. The employments, however, were down 12% over last November, but up still year-to-date, 6.9, almost 7%. Cape Air saw a 16% decrease in employments. Nantucket Air was up 25%, or 141 passengers. Tradewinds was down 57%, and Retrix was also down 18%. In the Boston market, Cape Air had a 4% decrease, or 45 passengers. New Bedford traffic was down 27%, or 75 passengers. The Hyannis market for November, Cape Air was down 50%, 3 passengers. Nantucket Air was up 25%, 141. Retrix down 18 or 132. Overall, the market was flat with an increase of about 6 passengers. In the JFK market, Cape Air increased by 3% or 3 passengers. Vineyard traffic continued decline, was down 50% or 14 passengers. On the fuel side of the house, a Jet A sold in November was down 38.03% or 16,670 gallons. Year to date, it's still up 2.46%. And for December, it was up slightly, about 0.01%. It's basically flat. The avgas was up 7.67% in November, down year to date 3.5%. And for December, it was up 22.25%. Freight for November was down 11.55%, and year to date is still up slightly, almost 1%. Noise was a handout. There were no complaints for this month. And that concludes my report.
Any questions, comments? All right, commissioners' comments. There are in your packet the minutes of the Long-Range Planning Subcommittee meeting held on November 26th. They will be submitted to the committee for approval on February 7th, or the subcommittee. But if anybody has any comments or questions, please raise them. Hearing none, I will announce again that the Long Range Planning Subcommittee meeting will be held on February 7th.
Dan, I just have a quick question. We had put the minutes in there thinking that maybe you guys could approve the long-range planning minutes at this meeting. I know that we do have one on the 7th, which is fine, but I didn't know with moving forward, sometimes we don't have one like a year apart, so we didn't want to wait.
I think
Normally wait.
somebody's phone ringing or something. It's, well,
Time there is one.
I think they should be approved by the Long Range Planning Committee before they're submitted to the commission for approval. In fact, do they have to be submitted to the commission for
That
approval?
they do not.
Right.
So they just get approved at the committee. My only concern was that sometimes there's like a year in between and then we don't get minutes approved. This one is clearly we're having a meeting coming up, but
How would we approve it otherwise?
I didn't know if you're able to approve it at this meeting.
I don't think so.
Or at a commission meeting.
Yeah, I don't
since
think-
all the members of the
I don't think so.
Okay, that was just.
I mean, that's off the top of my head, but
No, that's
that's
fine.
my reaction.
However you want to do it. it's fine.
Okay. No, I understand the issue. But are there any other comments at this time from the
I have a
commission?
question. The long-range planning, all of us can go to,
Yes.
correct? I couldn't go on that one, but.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Any subcommittee meeting, anybody can attend.
Okay, I didn't know if you had to have it posted.
Publicly advertised.
Okay, thank you.
But you can't participate in the decision.
Right, that I understand. No, but I maybe want to.
Anything else from anybody? Is there public comment at this time? Hearing none. I will entertain a motion to go into executive session, not to return to public session, under General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A, to review for release the executive session minutes enumerated on the agenda, and for possible release, and the minutes of December 10th, 2019 for review and possible release. I should have brought this up under commissioners' comments, I guess. I would just say that we have reviewed the minutes. We really can't release, as crazy as it sounds, we can't release any of these at the moment. Under Clause 3, to discuss strategy with respect to the litigation regarding the Gatto claim, where the chair has determined that an open session may have detrimental effect on the litigating position of the Airport Commission. C, under Clause 3, to discuss strategy with respect to the litigation regarding Walsh, where the chair has determined that an open session may have detrimental effect on the litigating position of the Airport Commission. And D, under Clause 3, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining, where the chair has determined that an open session may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining position of the Airport Commission.
So moved not to return to open session?
Second?
How do you vote, Mr. Buscarin?
Aye.
Ms. Topham?
Aye.
Ms. Planzer?
Aye.
Mr. Gasparo?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye.